So my name's Cole. I'm an animal rights activist. What's your name?
My name's Carly.
Carly. Nice to meet you. And yours?
Michaela.
Michaela?
Nice to meet you.
So the question I'm asking today is, why aren't you vegan?
Why am I not vegan? I guess I've just never really considered it. I used to live on a farm, so I've just kind of grown up on a household that we just eat meat and like we hunt and stuff.
Sure.
I also have like a condition that causes me to like kind of lose blood and stuff.
Okay.
So I guess like having no source of like iron, which I know you can take pills and stuff, but I guess not having like the nutrients and
Yeah,
stuff.
you know, there's a lot of vegan sources of iron out there. Beans are really high in iron.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a vitamin C supplement to increase your iron absorption with different foods. And so it's, you know, I've known a lot of people who eat animals that also have problems with like anemia and blood loss and
Yeah,
stuff.
I have like anemia and stuff.
Yeah. So how about you? Why aren't you vegan?
It's just, I guess it's just not for me. I've never tried being fully vegan, but I've tried being vegetarian a couple times. Because at the end of the day, you know, I like have learned a lot. I've studied a lot and did a lot of research, and I guess on the American like food systems, and like seeing and learning how it works kind of makes me feel a little like icky inside.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
So like that was a really big part of why I wanted to go vegetarian, and I've done it a couple times, but it's just, I guess I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I can never commit to it because I just don't enjoy it.
How would you define veganism in your own words? Is it a diet, a philosophy? How would you define it?
I think veganism, I feel like everybody has their different reasons for doing it. I think the two biggest reasons I see is more of a philosophical way, more of a humanity moral thing. And then on the other hand, I see a lot of people who've gone vegan for like their health. So I think it just matters on the person. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay. How about you? How would you define veganism?
I think I would describe it as like the same way. I see people be vegan. Like one of my good friends, her parents were vegan, and so like I've had like their food and stuff, and it low-key kind of tastes the same as like normal food.
Right.
So I guess it's just like a lifestyle. But I either hear people doing it for like animal rights or like a lifestyle for their health.
Yeah.
Do you think that taste justifies animal abuse? Why or why not?
I don't think I would say it justifies animal abuse, but also I feel like we live in a culture where it's like I guess sociably like acceptable to just.
I think it just depends. I honestly think it just depends on how it's sourced, if that makes sense. I don't think that eating the animals per se is the problem.
But I think it's like
we're predators, and I think just like
Well, I disagree with that we're predators. I don't think that humans are. You know, you look at lions, tigers, and stuff. They can take animals and just rip the flesh off their bodies with their claws and their teeth. Humans, we can't really do that. We're more reliant on like cooked foods. If we tried to eat a lot of the food that lions and sharks, they eat a lot of decaying bodies, which, you know, the animal products in stores are decaying bodies. And but we have to cook them in order to make them edible, you know. So I would disagree that humans are predators. You know.
Have you seen those like workout people? Like they eat like those
raw
like
vegan
Yeah,
stuff.
like,
raw vegans.
Yeah,
haven't
that
seen
was
a
the
raw
wrong.
vegan.
That was
I
the
think
wrong
she was
word.
talking about carnivores.
I meant
Yeah,
carnivores,
that's
not
very
carnivores.
dangerous.
Really,
Yeah.
That's scary. That's scary.
it kind of grosses me out. But I don't know. I think it all just comes down to sustainability,
Yeah.
if that makes
I
sense.
have seen that
I just think
chicken
the system that we
documentary.
have right now
Well,
is.
let's talk about animals, right? Because I think cows, pigs, and chickens, their rights and their conception as individuals who feel things and want to live like us get put to the wayside. You know, would y'all agree with that?
No, I agree with that.
I guess I could
honestly.
agree with that. I haven't really thought about it, so I don't
Yeah.
want to
I know.
be like give like an ignorant answer.
Yeah. What do you think would make a cow, a pig, or a chicken any different than a dog or a cat? Because that's my question.
Yeah, I guess because we've like domesticated dogs and cats, and I mean, have you seen like those those monkey documentaries, like where people are trying to like domesticate monkeys, but you can't because they're like wild animals? I guess that's kind of how I view
Well,
it.
some people have
But also,
done it.
I had a pet cow when I was little,
Oh, that's so cute.
and my parents would always make the joke that they took him to the slaughterhouse, like when we would eat a hamburger or
funny.
something.
That's
That's
terrible.
horrible.
Yeah, I used to make jokes about eating cows too, But I saw some slaughterhouse footage. It was a small family-run slaughterhouse, and this is what people would think of when they say like local. It was a very local, small, family-owned. That was the worst slaughterhouse footage I've ever seen, and the reason why is because they took this cow and they were terrified from the moment they got on the kill floor.
I'm just wondering, do you think that what happens in this slaughterhouse, would you call it humane? That's what most people would say.
If you mean we're acting in a compassionate manner,
Yeah.
because we have dominion over these animals, then yes.
You think, okay, so you would call it compassionate, what happens inside of this particular slaughterhouse, yours? Okay.
Because you have to treat animals with respect.
Okay.
They shoved them into this metal cage and locked the doors behind them to where they couldn't move around. And his family members were hung upside down and like eviscerated, and he could see that, but he could also smell the blood. And so what happened is the slaughterhouse owner put the bolt pistol, it's a gun that they shoot the cows in the head, they don't always die immediately. That cow could smell the blood on the bolt pistol and knocked the bolt pistol off the table in front of them.
Watch as this noticeably distressed cow is so afraid that they nudge the bolt gun off of the ledge. Even a staff member was surprised at this. You can see the cow moving around while still trying to breathe through the hole in their neck. And then he finishes with his final display of respect.
Oh wow, that's cool. That's interesting. Is that like why you wanted to? Are you vegan?
I am vegan. Yeah, I do like it. I like having a clean conscience because I know what happens to animals, and I don't think it's right for me to pay to kill someone else when I want to live.
Yeah.
I don't think that it makes you immoral if you do eat meat. In my opinion, I don't think it makes someone
Why is that?
immoral. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. That's just not, I just don't feel that way. I feel like if you eat meat, I don't think that it says that you're not morally a good person.
I would say we're morally complex people, and I don't like to think of people as like good or bad.
Yeah.
I think we're all a mixed bag.
I don't think it makes you any more bad. Like, not saying that that's what you're saying.
Would you say that causing unnecessary pain to an animal is a bad thing?
I would say yes.
Unnecessary pain, yeah.
Right.
I feel like, especially with eating meat, I think it's just, I don't think it should be so, like, I guess, gruesome, if anything.
Yeah.
I feel like it should be very quick and just like when you...
Well, put yourself in the animal's position, right? Say you were treated very well. You get massages, you get like ice cream and stuff like that, bubble baths, all kinds of just wonderful treatment that animals don't get. But you were treated the best you can imagine, right? And then one day at a fraction of your lifespan, maybe in a year or so from now, someone was to shoot you in the head. Would you feel that your rights were violated if that happened to you?
I mean, I don't know. This is going to sound a little bad, but a part of me feels like that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It's just
I
like
guess
when you
kinda
put down an animal,
Yeah.
you normally kind of...
Well, you don't have to die, just like the animal doesn't have to die.
So I don't really... Like, that's just... I don't know. I don't really feel bad about that. It sounds to me like the animal lived their life to the fullest.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because even like with humans, I see like... And like, again...
So if someone treats you well, they have the right to kill you.
Hey...
I wouldn't necessarily say
I wouldn't
that,
say
but-
yeah, but I wouldn't say no. I think it's just a complex issue.
Would you be okay with someone taking your life if they treated you well?
You know, I would have to say no.
I would say no too.
You know, I would have to say
I would say no.
no, but at the same time, I think with the way our society is built, that is the best way to
So
do
why is there this double standard that if someone was to treat an animal,
Because if an
well-
animal did that to me, let's say, like, in my opinion, I
well,
feel-
humans are killing animals. It's not the
Yeah.
other way around.
I know, I'm just saying, like, if it was the other way around, if animals, because I've always had that opinion. Some people think it's silly, but I don't. I feel like when animals are violent towards humans, I see it the same way as when humans are violent towards humans. I don't know how to explain
Interesting.
it. I don't
Yeah, that's
really-
interesting.
Like, a lot of people are really like, oh, well, we got to kill this animal because it did this to this human. I think sometimes you should, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think an animal is a bad animal because it's killed a human.
No, I don't either.
More
Yeah.
than the way I see a human is a bad human for killing another human, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think both are equally as bad.
Yeah, but you would agree that the act of killing is bad. Because I want to live, and like you said,
Yeah.
you know, animals are the same way. They want to live. You know, if someone is running towards them aggressively and they think they're about to be harmed, a cow, a chicken, a pig will try to avoid that situation. You know, they expand away from pain and they gravitate to pleasure like humans do. You know, and they have a desire to maintain homeostasis and like live, you know.
I guess it's just a very complex thing, just because like for centuries we've been hunting and killing animals
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
growing
And then-
food.
Well, haven't we been doing like other things for very long times? Like humans have been murdering other humans since the beginning of time, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that the length of time makes an act ethical?
I would say no, but I also think like, you know, like the act of survival, like we need food to survive and stuff. I guess I kind of see it as like that.
Do
Like,
we need to eat animals in order to survive?
I would say yes, maybe.
Well, I don't.
Well, yeah, you're vegan, but
'Cause I don't know. We don't look at lions
Yeah, I
crazy
wouldn't-
when they kill a Bambi.
yeah,
I don't know. I feel
Well,
like
they
it's like
it's kind of like
the hierarchy of
Yeah.
life. Like, I don't mean it in like a bad way. I just feel like it just goes back to like the life pyramid. Not the life pyramid, but I don't remember
yeah,
the
you-
name.
yeah, you
but
know
you
the
know what I'm
pyramid.
trying.
Circle
Yeah,
life.
like the circle of life.
Yeah, that's an
kind of
art.
a
I think
thing.
that's an arbitrary concept because, you know, I could go around like hunting and killing dogs and cats and say it's the circle of life, but I don't have to
And
do
they
that.
do in other
And you know,
countries.
lions have to kill other animals in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we as humans, we don't have to do that. You know, I'm fairly confident there's a way to address your condition with plant-based foods. You know, I may be wrong about that, but I would talk to a nutritionist because the amount of people who can't follow a plant-based diet is very small.
yeah. But I guess it also kind of goes back like, what are we like? Herbivores, or is that just like
I think it was like omnivore.
omnivores?
Or
so
something
we,
like that
we
in the
eat
middle.
meat and plants and
Well,
stuff.
we can. You know, we can do that.
But I guess
We can.
the concept
We
is
don't
we
have to though.
should.
You know, we don't have to. Yeah. So, what would stop you from being vegan today? Like, why do you think it's okay to go pay someone to put an animal in a slaughterhouse and violently end their lives? Why is that a practice you would continue to support?
I don't know. I guess I'm not gonna say like I feel like on the broad spectrum of things, it's socially like acceptable, but also
For sure.
this is gonna sound so bad. I really like steak, man.
Yeah.
So bad.
Do you think that cows are abused to produce steak? Do you think that slitting an animal's throat when they want to live is abusive?
I would say yes, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. This might sound so like I guess like privileged or whatever, but I don't really see like animals and like I guess humans on the same level, if that makes sense. And that's probably something
Yeah.
that we've been
No,
see.
and you know, vegans, a lot of vegans don't either.
yeah.
A lot of vegans don't even like
They don't
animals.
like the I guess the how animals are
Yeah,
treated. Like
but I don't have to look at a cow, right, on the same level as a human to not eat a cow. Because, you know, I don't even eat other humans. But I don't have to look at a cow as having the same value as a human to not eat them because I don't have to kill them in order to survive.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess I see that view. I guess I've just been like, you know, when you live like a certain lifestyle all your life, I guess that's kind of like all you know.
Yeah.
But I am open to like, you know, learning more about other things. Like I never would have thought about like animal rights or anything like that.
I do appreciate learning about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, despite learning about it, I still don't feel like what I'm doing is, I guess, inherently wrong at the same time.
So you don't think that causing animals to die unnecessarily is wrong?
I mean, it's wrong, but at the same time, I don't think that I'm wrong for eating meat.
Yeah.
That's just how I personally feel. Like, I understand your argument, and I understand, and I know
There's a lot of social conditioning.
wrong, but I just don't think it's wrong. And maybe it just goes back
Why
to
don't
that social-
why don't you think it's wrong to pay to kill animals?
I just don't think it's wrong. I don't know. Like, other animals...
Do you think the social conditioning has a part of it?
Yeah, it probably is social condition. Because, like, let's say we lived in a completely opposite society. You were arguing to me like I should be eating animals. I probably would be saying the exact same thing
I
from
probably
that
would.
perspective.
I think it definitely is social conditioning. Like
I think it's definitely...
like I am definitely well now I'm gonna eat steak later and I'm gonna be like, well dang.
Well, I would encourage you to go get a Beyond Burger instead.
Beyond
like
Burger.
I said, I tried it.
Or
and I
isn't
just
it like
didn't
what's it called, the Impossible Whopper, where it's
Yeah.
vegan?
Yeah.
I've actually had veggie patties before, and it's really good. It's just I don't think I could completely give up steak like that.
I've had all of it. I've tried, like I said, I've tried like alternative lifestyles, but I just didn't enjoy it. I guess.
I would just encourage
So I guess look into it more.
y'all to put yourself in the animal's position. Like, how would you feel if someone was paying for you to die for a trivial reason when they could just do something else?
I guess that's interesting to think about. It makes me think of this movie I saw where these people were in the Amazon and they went into this tribe that were like cannibals and stuff, and like it was real freaky.
Well, I've got some resources for y'all. I appreciate you stopping to talk with me. I don't want to use up too much of your time. And
I'm glad you're not like
Yeah.
one of those people that I guess like immediately start yelling if you have like a different view.